Present progress. Today the sewer is clean, cold, straight, correct. It almost realizes the ideal of what is understood in England by the word respectable. It is proper and greyish, laid out by rule and line. One might almost say as though it came out of a bandbox. It resembles a tradesman who has become a councillor of state. One can almost see distinctly there. The mire there comports itself with decency. At first, one might readily mistake it for one of those subterranean corridors, which were so common in former days, and so useful in flights of monarchs and princes, in those good old times, when the people loved their kings. The present sewer is a beautiful sewer. The pure style reigns there. The classical rectilinear Alexandrine which, driven out of poetry, appears to have taken refuge in architecture, seems mingled with all the stones of that long, dark and whitish vault. Each outlet is an arcade. The Rue de Rivoli serves as pattern even in the sewer. However, if the geometrical line is in place anywhere, it is certainly in the drainage trench of a great city. There, everything should be subordinated to the shortest road. The sewer has, nowadays, assumed a certain official aspect. The very police reports, of which it sometimes forms the subject, no longer are wanting in respect towards it. The words which characterize it in administrative language are sonorous and dignified. What used to be called a gut is now called a gallery. What used to be called a hole is now called a surveying orifice. Vienne would no longer meet with his ancient temporary provisional lodging. This network of cellars has its immemorial population of prowlers, rodents, swarming in greater numbers than ever. From time to time, an aged and veteran rat risks his head at the window of the sewer and surveys the Parisians. But even these vermin grow tame, so satisfied are they with their subterranean palace. The cesspool no longer retains anything of its primitive ferocity. The rain, which in former days soiled the sewer, now washes it. Nevertheless, do not trust yourself too much to it. Miasms still inhabit it. It is more hypocritical than irreproachable. The Prefecture of Police and the Commission of Health have done their best. But, in spite of all the processes of disinfection, it exhales a vague, suspicious odor like tartuffe after confession. Let us confess that, taking it all in all, this sweeping is a homage which the sewer pays to civilization. And as, from this point of view, Tartuffe's conscience is a progress over the Augean stables, it is certain that the sewers of Paris have been improved. It is more than progress. It is transmutation. Between the ancient and the present sewer there is a revolution. What has effected this revolution? The man whom all the world forgets, and whom we have mentioned, Brunezzo. Chapter 6. Future progress. The excavation of the sewer of Paris has been no slight task. The last 10 centuries have toiled at it without being able to bring it to a termination, any more than they have been able to finish Paris. The sewer, in fact, receives all the counter-shocks of the growth of Paris. Within the bosom of the earth, it is a sort of mysterious polyp with 1,000 antennae, which expands below as the city expands above. Every time that the city cuts a street, the sewer stretches out an arm. The old monarchy had constructed only 23,300 meters of sewers. That was where Paris stood in this respect on the 1st of January, 1806. Beginning with this epoch, of which we shall shortly speak, the work was usefully and energetically resumed and prosecuted. Napoleon built, the figures are curious, 4,804 meters. Louis XVI, 5,709. Charles X, 10,836. Louis Philippe, 89,020. The Republic of 1848, 23,381. The present government, 70,500. In all, at the present time, 226,610 meters. 60 leagues of sewers. The enormous entrails of Paris. An obscure ramification ever at work. A construction which is immense and ignored. As the reader sees, the subterranean labyrinth of Paris is today more than 10 times what it was at the beginning of the century. It is difficult to form any idea of all the perseverance and the efforts which have been required to bring this cesspool to the point of relative perfection in which it now is. It was with great difficulty that the ancient monarchical provostship and, during the last 10 years of the 18th century, the revolutionary mayoralty, had succeeded in perforating the 5 leagues of sewer which existed previous to 1806. All sorts of obstacles hindered this operation, some peculiar to the soil, others inherent in the very prejudices of the laborious population of Paris. Paris is built upon a soil which is singularly rebellious to the pick, the hoe, the bore, and to human manipulation. There is nothing more difficult to pierce and to penetrate than the geological formation upon which is superposed the marvelous historical formation called Paris. As soon as work in any form whatsoever is begun and adventures upon this stretch of alluvium, subterranean resistances abound. There are liquid clays, springs, hard rocks, and those soft and deep quagmires which special science calls moutardes. 59 The pick advances laboriously through the calcareous layers, alternating with very slender threads of clay and schistose beds in plates encrusted with oyster shells, the contemporaries of the pre-Adamite oceans. Sometimes a rivulet suddenly bursts through a vault that has been begun, and inundates the laborers. Or a layer of marl is laid bare, and rolls down with the fury of a cataract, breaking the stoutest supporting beams like glass. Quite recently, at Villette, when it became necessary to pass the collecting sewer under the St. Martin Canal without interrupting navigation or emptying the canal, a fissure appeared in the basin of the canal. Water suddenly became abundant in the subterranean tunnel, which was beyond the power of the pumping engines. It was necessary to send a diver to explore the fissure which had been made in the narrow entrance of the Grand Basin, and it was not without great difficulty that it was stopped up. Elsewhere near the Seine, and even at a considerable distance from the river, as for instance, at Belleville, Grand Rue and Lumière Passage, quicksands are encountered in which one sticks fast, and in which a man sinks visibly. Add suffocation by miasms, burial by slides, and sudden crumbling of the earth. Add the typhus, with which the workman becomes slowly impregnated. In our own day, after having excavated the gallery of Clichy, with a banquette to receive the principal water conduit of Orc, a piece of work which was executed in a trench 10 meters deep. After having, in the midst of landslides, and with the aid of excavations often putrid, and of shoring up, vaulted the Beavre from the Boulevard de l'Hôpital, as far as the Seine. After having, in order to deliver Paris from the floods of Montmartre and in order to provide an outlet for that river-like pool 9 hectares in extent, which crouched near the Barrière des Martyrs. After having, let us state, constructed the line of sewers from the Barrière Blanche to the road of Aubervilliers, in 4 months, working day and night, at a depth of 11 meters. After having, a thing heretofore unseen, made a subterranean sewer in the Rue Bar du Bec, without a trench, 6 meters below the surface, the superintendent, Monod, died. After having vaulted 3,000 meters of sewer in all quarters of the city, from the Rue Traversière Saint-Antoine to the Rue de l'Ursine. After having freed the Carrefour Sensia Mouffetard from inundations of rain by means of the branch of the Arborlite. After having built the St. Georges sewer on rock and concrete in the fluid sands, after having directed the formidable lowering of the flooring of the vault timber in the Notre Dame de Nazareth branch, Doulo the engineer died. There are no bulletins for such acts of bravery as these, which are more useful, nevertheless, than the brutal slaughter of the field of battle. The sewers of Paris in 1832 were far from being what they are today. Brunezot had given the impulse, but the cholera was required to bring about the vast reconstruction which took place later on. It is surprising to say, for example, that in 1821, a part of the belt sewer, called the Grand Canal, as in Venice, still stood stagnating uncovered to the sky, in the Rue des Gourds. It was only in 1821 that the city of Paris found in its pocket the 260,080 francs and 6 centimes required for covering this mass of filth. The 3 absorbing wells, of the Combat, the Cunette, and Saint-Mandé, with their discharging mouths, their apparatus, their cesspools, and their depuratory branches, only date from 1836. The intestinal sewer of Paris has been made over anew, and, as we have said, it has been extended more than tenfold within the last quarter of a century. 30 years ago, at the epoch of the insurrection of the 5th and 6th of June, it was still, in many localities, nearly the same ancient sewer. A very great number of streets which are now convex were then sunken causeways. At the end of a slope, where the tributaries of a street or crossroads ended, there were often to be seen large, square gratings with heavy bars, whose iron, polished by the footsteps of the throng, gleamed dangerous and slippery for vehicles, and caused horses to fall. The official language of the roads and bridges gave to these gratings the expressive name of Car6.60. In 1832, in a number of streets, in the Rue de l'Étoile, the Rue Saint-Louis, the Rue du Temple, the Rue Ville du Temple, the Rue Notre-Dame de Nazareth, the Rue Folie Méricourt, the Quai aux Fleurs, the Rue du Petit Musc, the Rue du Normandie, the Rue Pont aux Beaches, the Rue des Marais, the Faubourg Saint-Martin, the Rue Notre-Dame des Victoires, the Faubourg Montmartre, the Rue Grange Batelier, in the Champs-Élysées, the Rue Jacob, the Rue de Tournon, the ancient Gothic sewer still cynically displayed its more. It consisted of enormous voids of stone catch basins sometimes surrounded by stone posts, with monumental effrontery. Paris in 1806 still had nearly the same sewers numerically as stated in 1663. 5,300 fathoms. After Brunezot, on 1 January, 1832, it had 40,300 meters. Between 1806 and 1831, there had been built, on an average, 750 meters annually. Afterwards 8 and even 10,000 meters of galleries were constructed every year, in masonry, of small stones, with hydraulic mortar which hardens under water, on a cement foundation. At 200 francs the meter, the 60 leagues of Paris sewers of the present day represent 48 millions. In addition to the economic progress which we have indicated at the beginning, grave problems of public hygiene are connected with that immense question. The sewers of Paris. Paris is the center of 2 sheets, a sheet of water and a sheet of air. The sheet of water, lying at a tolerably great depth underground, but already sounded by 2 bores, is furnished by the layer of green clay situated between the chalk and the Jurassic limestone. This layer may be represented by a disc 5 and 20 leagues in circumference. A multitude of rivers and brooks ooze there. One drinks the Seine, the Marne, the yonne, the oise, the aisne, the cher, the vienne and the loire in a glass of water from the well of Grenelle. The sheet of water is healthy. It comes from heaven in the first place and next from the earth. The sheet of air is unhealthy. It comes from the sewer. All the miasms of the cesspool are mingled with the breath of the city. Hence this bad breath. The air taken from above a dung-heap, as has been scientifically proved, is purer than the air taken from above Paris. In a given time, with the aid of progress, mechanisms become perfected, and as light increases, the sheet of water will be employed to purify the sheet of air. That is to say, to wash the sewer. The reader knows that by washing the sewer we mean the restitution of the filth to the earth, the return to the soil of dung and of manure to the fields. Through this simple act, the entire social community will experience a diminution of misery and an augmentation of health. At the present hour, the radiation of diseases from Paris extends to 50 leagues around the Louvre, taken as the hub of this pestilential wheel. We might say that, for 10 centuries, the cesspool has been the disease of Paris. The sewer is the blemish which Paris has in her blood. The popular instinct has never been deceived in it. The occupation of sewerman was formerly almost as perilous, and almost as repugnant to the people, as the occupation of knacker, which was so long held in horror and handed over to the executioner. High wages were necessary to induce a mason to disappear in that fetid mine. The ladder of the cesspool cleaner hesitated to plunge into it. It was said, in proverbial form, to descend into the sewer is to enter the grave. And all sorts of hideous legends, as we have said, covered this colossal sink with terror. A dread sinkhole which bears the traces of the revolutions of the globe as of the revolutions of man. And where are to be found vestiges of all cataclysms from the shells of the deluge to the rag of Mara.